Hello one, hello all, it's the most finally back ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Kid Cudi, Insano. Kid Cudi, pretty much a legend at this point, singer, songwriter, instrumentalist, producer, director, creator. The man really does it all, and I feel that's not really spoken on enough. And also his influence in the game, for sure. Now, with Kid Cudi, it's pretty much no mystery at this point if you've watched my last review or whenever Kid Cudi comes about, my opinion on him. I think his debut was great, but in the midst of all this, things have been kind of spotty, kind of rocky, with Wizard being a very lackluster rock experience, and with Speeding Bullet to Heaven being an even bigger rocky, actually the rock bottom experience, to say the least, with either boring singing, annoying singing, and just a very failed attempt at grunge. However, I did feel there was a bit of a comeback when he came back with Man on the Moon 3, and also with the collab he did with Ye, Kid See Ghost, which I don't have much of a desire to return to due to Ye's turn. We'll leave that there. We'll leave that there. And as I alluded to earlier, a director, a creator of the show Intergalactic, which I believe was not a bad album. I didn't think it was terrible, but it kind of left me like, okay, this is pretty much just promotion here where we're getting some good tracks, but not an overall great album. But now, time has passed, and we have now Insano, which honestly, I did not have high expectations for due to the singles being so lackluster. I just felt he was regurgitating Travis Scott's style, and I don't know why when Travis Scott has been influenced by him, so I don't see why he would want to gravitate towards his style, the elements that make his tracks, when clearly Travis has borrowed from him to make his own style, and it just leaves me scratching my head. And on top of that too, it really feels like Kid Cudi is going for bangers here, but the only problem is the bangers are not banging. And really, it's pretty much a gap in quality, the gap in the structure of these songs, how some end before they could even begin. And the thing is, I know Kid Cudi could probably pull off bangers. He probably can. The only problem is he's pulling from the most generic, blandest patches of production he could possibly get his hands on. Because I feel, again, these tracks are underdeveloped and don't really have that anthemic, effervescent, galactic nuance that he can bring to a track. It's just not here. The climactic finishes, they're not really here. The feeling of being in space and being in a cathartic world with Cudi, it's not here. And if this is the world he brought me to, I would want to go home immediately. But that's not to say this is completely bad. It's just very, very mediocre. And really just makes me want to sleep in the back of the club instead of dancing with Cudi. And there's really false advertising here because the album says Insano when this album is anything but insane or crazy or wild. It's pretty tame. It's pretty watered down. And I'm just left very disappointed with really, really forgettable hooks. Poorly executed hooks, like on the track Keep 'Em Bouncing, where he just says bounce, 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 bounce on a majority of the track with these goofy "do you know" refrains, and it's just not a good vibrant time. It's really not. And then we get more weak repetitious hooks like on Get Off Me, where it's not only lyrically underwhelming, but the hook isn't very powerful and epic as I would hope, which really continue on the track Most Ain't Dennis. And with the track this week, I'm actually glad Most Ain't Dennis. The song Wow does have its moments, but the singing, oh man, the singing. It leaves a lot to be desired. He's just crooning aimlessly on this track without any direction at all, where it sounds like he's singing through a drive-through speaker, which he also does on 7 with Lil Wayne, which is a shame because I think A$AP Rocky really delivers on here. Like, normally he's not a very lyrical guy, but he definitely comes through with some bars on here with a lot of charisma, a lot of energy, a lot of style. These dudes can't stomach me, better get a mandrake. It's just kneecapped by this overall mediocre song. And I feel like the bangers are so haphazardly put together to a point where you're listening to a track and you're like, where's this even going? Where is this even going? What direction is this headed in? Because you got the song Electric Wave Baby, and we get a random inclusion of Ace of Base with these island-centric like woodwinds on the track. And don't get me wrong, I do love a good amalgamation, but this sounds like what you would get if the characters from Gilligan's Island were transported to a club in the 90s. Sounds kind of goofy, right? Yes, you would be correct. And the verses are so non-starter, the vocals are borderline laughable, and unfortunately, with the star power that this album has, the features are very lackluster, like on the song Too Damn High, which could have had potential. It does have a very lively, colorful, Drain Gang video game type element to it, but Lil Yachty sounds like he does not want to be there, and really phones in the last few bars of his verse. And the two have no chemistry. Yachty lacks so much enthusiasm on this track, and At the Party sounds like a party I don't really want to go to. It's definitely a very nocturnal, woozy cut, but it doesn't make me want to party at all. And of course, Travis Scott has to remind you of how weak of a lyricist he is on here, because he just has to do that with bars like, she's coming fast like a cheetah, but she not a cheetah, cause I'ma have fun to run from a cheetah. Yeah, it's really just a letdown, even though Travis is not the most skilled lyricist of the world, but I would expect there to be fun in this verse, but there isn't. There's no fun, there's no nuance, there's no intergalactic passage or anything. It's just boring, bland, and forgettable. Also, Lil Wayne's features on 7 sound so in and out, and really add nothing to this track or the album. And speaking of adding nothing, I think it's just disgustingly distasteful to just tack on XXXTentacion's vocals on here. Granted, I'm not a huge fan, but can we stop trying to milk the vocals of those who have passed? It's disrespectful, and I wish it would just go away. And there's also these awful blurts in the instrumentation. And there's also torture, which, yes, Kid Cudi has acknowledged in the past that he does suffer from mental health issues. That is true. But for this to have a club type vibe to it, a club type presence, I find it hard to sympathize with that, because you're expressing your emotion, but you're making this sound like it's supposed to be a banger, and it's just not a good look where you're trying to be introspective and you're trying to be deep, but you're passing this off as club fodder. And there's also Funky Wizard Smoke, where the hook sounds so off and robotic, and even the vibrant beat and jazzy pianos could not save this one. Get You Gone does have these speedy flows, a grip of melody with a solid hook, but it just fizzles out way too quickly. And that's how I feel about Mr. Kula. It's like as soon as we're about to get a solid, consistent banger, or track for that matter, it just ends before it gets started. And the worst track is definitely Porsche Topless, where the horns are so buried by the bass, and again sounds like counterfeit Travis. But can we get some nuance to this? Can we get something that makes this stand out from a Travis Scott track and not a bland Travis Scott track? It just sounds so cheap and it sounds so uninspired. I know I've been shitting on the album for the past few minutes, but this album does have some highlights. A handful of highlights. If the highlights were 3 circles. Yeah. Because I do think this album does start off strong with the opener. I think it has a bold presence. I do love the lumbering bass, the wailing pitch samples. It gives a defiant return type vibe, even though Cudi is not that lyrical on this track at all, really. But he does have a nice, slick, charismatic flow. The smoky vocals are definitely there. And Cud Life, I do love the sinister beat here, with the ghostly, weepy strings and bass. Definitely one of Cudi's solid bangers here. And I legitimately felt life and energy from this. And there's Blue Sky, easily the best track on this album. I love the psychedelic keys, how the synth arpeggios twinkle in the background. And Cudi's hums sound great. They sound bold. Kind of reminding me of Crash Test Dummies a little bit, a band who definitely influenced Cudi, and it really shines here. The melodies on the hook are great. The overall song, it's mesmerizing. It's beautiful. Feels like I'm driving with Cudi through space, in the sky, and we're back on the Man on the Moon era. But yeah, aside from that, I didn't really get much out of this album. I found the tracks to be very underwhelming. Sure, this album does go in a different direction, but it's not a direction I find very interesting. It's not a direction I find very engaging, and I hope for the future we could get more galactic style Cudi. Because here's the thing, the bangers, it's fine in concept. It's just I don't think Cudi is pulling it off well, but this hasn't been the first time he hasn't pulled something off well. Or the other time he didn't pull something off well. But yeah, overall I'm feeling a 2.5 out of 5 stars on this. And that's just how I'm feeling on it. Very indifferent towards this album, unfortunately. But yeah, that's just how I feel about it. How do you feel about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Kid Cudi, Insano. Till we meet again.